one or the other, a series where we take variants from any class and see if they either live up to or exceed expectations of the base variant, or are below par and not worth the time and effort. Today's variant in question shall be of the premium Z7 Imp. Will he exceed expectations, or will he fall short? Let's get started. The Z7 Imp is a variant of the Imp class who can only be obtained through purchasing the deluxe edition of the game. His primary fire, unlike every other Imp variant, is semi-automatic, and its fire rate is based on how fast the player can mash the trigger. The weapon has a maximum fire rate of 500 rounds per minute and has 18 ammo per clip before needing to take a 1.5 second reload. Each shot fired can deal 12 damage for a normal hit and 14.4 for a critical hit, which drops down to 6 for a normal hit and 7.2 for a critical hit at mid-range. The projectile velocity on Z7 is significantly faster, to the point where you are able to reliably engage in long distance combat and poke at enemies, making him reliable at all distances. Now, since we're covering an Imp, we also must cover his mech. The Z7 mech has 350 health and moves at the same speed as most other mechs. The changes are in the primary weapon and abilities. The Z7 mech's primary weapon is essentially a stat swap of the standard mech, trading in fire rate for more damage per shot. The weapon fires at 700 rounds per minute and can fire for an impressive 7.6 consecutive seconds before suffering an overheat, making the weapon unavailable for the next 3.75 seconds. The biotic pull launches a special projectile that has a 50-meter homing range. If it connects with an enemy, it will lift them into the air and then pull them towards the mech. This has a 20-second cooldown and pairs with the mech's other ability, the bionic blade. The blade is simply a more restricted version of the Robo Stomp of the normal mech, as the blade affects only in front of it, but it does have a quicker cast time and deals 80 damage to enemies in front of it. This ability has a 15-second cooldown. Like every other Imp, they have 75 health and move at 7.45 meters per second. Now, to bring in the stock variant as a comparison, which of the two are better? Well, the stock Imp offers a fully automatic primary that does not require the player to constantly mash the attack button, which makes him more ideal for players who do not have a great trigger finger. His Z-Mech also not only has a primary that pumps out damage more consistently, but both of its abilities work independently from one another, meaning they don't rely on the other for optimal usage. However, the Imp's primary weapon does have a large amount of recoil and spread, and the projectiles are not only slow, but arc heavily at a distance. Now, when we take a trip back to Z7, in terms of the Imp, there are many improvements. Whilst his primary fire does require a good trigger finger, players who are experienced with mashing can very easily rack up huge amounts of damage very quickly. This also makes his primary adaptable to situations, as with trigger discipline, they can make it sniper accurate. The primary also has a much faster projectile velocity, making him more reliable at a distance. His mech, whilst it does have a powerful primary, its abilities are rather situational and partially depend on each other in some scenarios. The abilities are also not as impactful as the standard Z-Mechs, making them not as useful. Now, when we get into upgrades, this is where specifically the Z7 Imp truly begins to shine. The ammo and damage upgrades are where the Z7 Imp's damage output turns from dangerous to outright threatening, since not only does his total damage go even higher, but his damage per clip reaches over 300, allowing him in some cases to murder the bulkiest of plants within a clip. Even our fiery lord and savior, the barbecue tree man, can fall to the Z7 Imp in just over 2 seconds, compared to the stock Imp, who takes nearly 5 seconds and needs to reload at least once. Health is something that obviously all Imps require, due to their fragile nature, but because of Z7's aforementioned monstrous damage output, that 10 extra health can allow him to survive things he normally wouldn't, and have that window of opportunity extended by just enough to where he can kill enemies when he normally couldn't. The upgrades do not affect the mechs in any capacity, so their performance remains unaffected. Whilst the stock Imp does gain an enhanced performance, he does not reach the same level as the Z7 Imp, which allows him to thrive with a noticeable difference in gameplay. After analyzing further, I can confirm that the Z7 Imp is significantly better than the stock Imp purely due to his massive damage potential, adaptable primary, and overall much higher damage per clip. In terms of mechs however, I would say that the Z7's mech is on the same level as the standard mech, for whilst its primary may be better in long-term fights, its abilities do hold it back a bit for being both situational and not as impactful as stocks. Be sure to come back for the next episode in 2 weeks. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more shit like this. Have fun.